but this guy just wants to go to Chick-fil-A with me, and we're not going to get at these ideas, but it's like it's dirt. It's like it's eating. It's this kind of things. And he's interested in that. If I said, do you want to talk on the phone for an hour? He's not interested, right? So I'm wondering about this like bizarre dichotomy where I think so many of us have been Jeff. Like what you just described, I can imagine a ton of people in the corner are like, why won't people talk to me about this very deep thing? When instead, like they just want to have small chat. And I'm trying to figure out how do you get to both? How do you get the bits where someone is talking about one thing, but they're actually talking about another thing? How do you
David,
rise above? Yeah, go ahead, Luke.
So a wise person once told me that what they try to do in life is to be what the situation calls for. And I've even how I will relate to that and almost just like put the polar side of what I was talking about earlier of not wanting to talk to midwits is part of it is just a little bit of that is insisting on your own way, or even like what Jeff was talking about. I completely relate to everything you're talking about. Like I hate small talk, but not everyone is me. To like relationally demand that everybody wants to interact in a situation how I want to react is to be an asshole.
That's me.
And so, and I've learned. I mean, I've even learned in my own marriage. My wife doesn't like talking about any of this stuff. Just like she relates to all of you. When I start talking and do a live stream, she's like, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. Like you sound like a crazy person.
Oh, I loved it when they were off in the background the other morning. We need to have that more often, Luke.
Yeah. And my son tries. Oh, he tries hard to understand because he loves me. But I think you need to do that work sometimes. But I don't like it.
The phrase is serve the situation.
I don't ever get your things right.
Don't worry, Luke. We never get yours right either.
Oh, that's good. For half a second, I thought Luke was the wise person who said something.
I quote myself, a wise person.
A wise man once said.
Yeah. That's how you get something to become popular.
I'm going to rise in support of small talk. I don't really like it any more than the rest of you, but it's an extremely important social technology that we should have a little respect for. Agreed, I think to the point you're making, Jeff, is the art of finding your way into a deeper conversation is a mostly lost art, and it desperately needed. If there's a redemptive idea here, there's a lot of people waking up to a world they don't recognize. And so there's a lot of people with a lot of questions. And so I think you'll be surprised how many people you encounter who just seem like normal people who are just one or two layers deep, actually really struggling to make sense of the world around them in all sorts of ways, right? I see Christians say conversation crowd. Exactly, Christian. The art of doing that, and the point we were saying earlier about they don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. You actually have to kind of like people to do this, right? And so small talk is part of liking people. You actually have to care what they have to say. When you ask them how you're doing, you actually want the answer, right? And when people sense that, they'll share more. So I just, I don't mean to lecture you all because I'm sure you know the truth of what I'm saying. It's just, just to remind us that, and the other thing I would say is before COVID and kind of before this whole TLC thing kind of emerged, I had a little project and I just put, Paul and I were talking about it at the time, and I put it out on Meetup, and I just described, hey, if you're out there and I use the old Feynman quote, I prefer questions that can't be answers than answers that can't be questioned, right? And so if you're one of those kind of people who just, likes to be able to get to the heart of the matter, and within 2 or 3 meetings, we had 25 people coming regularly. COVID hit, so then we moved it online for a while. So we were just getting started. There's lots of people with a lot on their mind in your neighborhood, and of course, my goal would have been like out of those relations. And some of those are still friends today, and some of them are in the chat right now. They were watching one of Paul's way back when videos, and he mentioned it right in the middle of some hour and a half thing, and all of a sudden I had 3 or 4 people show up at my thing in Nashville. So it's it's obvious to me that there's a hunger for this. And if you can find your way to those then leading to more meaningfully engaged relationships in real life, well, then now you have something.
I'd like to swing back to David's pitch, because David's pitch has everything to do with this. David pitched, what happens when we have it? We have the conversation we want instead of what the conversation becomes, or is that ever wrong? A change of direction. And conversations are living things. And I loved it when Jonathan Peugeot, it's just kind of, the angel of a conversation. And that's, I usually talk about the spirit of a conversation. And for me, that's what Estuary is really good at, building beautiful spirits of a conversation. And the spirits, but none of us are in charge of the conversation. None of us own the conversation. And so small talk, I mean, as a pastor, again, so much of standing in the back of church after church, someone comes to church, what to do? Small talk. And as a pastor, you can just get really good at all these little questions and getting them to just disclose a little bit more. And all of that is just a little bit more trust. How's the pastor doing with what I've just given him? And that's how relationships work. Relationships are journeys of mutual disclosure, and marriages too. I mean, there's just disclosure, vulnerability, all of this. And then we're always watching each other. Okay, I'm going to tell them this. How will they deal with that? Because there's some of me in that. Will they hurt me? Will they wound me? And that's then where you build relationship. And part of what's beautiful, again, what I've seen grow through this online space, to get back to Jeff's pitch, is, wow, and Grim Grizz has taught me a lot of this. We can do remarkably more here than I thought we could. And actually, Rod, to one of your enduring themes over time, I've never been able to sort of say it, and I have to be really careful when I talk about it, but I've been getting more at it lately when thinking about, when we're thinking about churches and boundaries. Where are they? Because I recently spoke with someone who is a fairly high status Christian, high profile Christian. And he basically confided to me saying, why is it sometimes I have online conversations, sometimes with Christians, sometimes with non-Christians, or sometimes with people outside the church, and the conversation feels more Christian than the conversations I'm having in church? And I hear that, I've seen it in the live stream, in the live chat today, that something has happened with churches, partly because you have the same struggle with marriage. Anytime you're trying to do something really hard, it's really hard. But there's something is happening here where, in my opinion, the Holy Spirit is working in ways that haven't sort of been fenced off by some of the things that you've pointed to, Rod. And I think part of what a lot of people, and why a lot of people have participated in this space, is that they have sensed that something is happening that they're not getting in church. It's church-like. The rules are different. And of course, Estuary is very that way too. So, and I don't think this is evil. In fact, I think it is part of God's grace to those who, for one reason or another, can't tolerate being within the boundaries of certain organizations.
I think part of it, and this is an idea that I go back to over and over again, and is probably the thing that when I'm talking to someone who has no idea about the Jordan Peterson stuff, I talked a bit about this idea of programs before on like a Luke live stream, and it's an idea that I've thought about a lot. Is I find the difficulty in small talk is trying to get at the person, and that's the problem that I have within the church. Is that I often feel like I can't get at the person. And that's actually the bit of frustration that I had a week ago, I doubt anyone even knows what the hell I'm talking about. But I was having an interaction with someone, and I felt like I couldn't get at the person, and I didn't know what they were getting at.
Right.
And I'm just like, I want to know if, like, it becomes the conviction. If you care about sports, God bless you, okay? But if I'm having a conversation with someone and they are saying platitudes and I don't believe they care about it, it's not that I don't care about it. You can talk to me about something I don't care about if you care about it, right? Like, Paul, I've never met your wife, so I have no opinion about her whatsoever. But you can tell me a story about her, and if I know you care about it, I can stand to hear that story. But like, this might be too personal. My brother was very, very casually dating more than one person, and one of those people demanded to be invited to my wedding. And I told my brother they weren't invited. My brother was like, "Why?" And I said, I'm going to put more effort into this than you. Like, I don't believe that you care about this person. Why are you going to make me care about this person? Like, I think that might be the difficulty of the platitudes or not getting at things. Like, I can listen to an autistic person talk to me about trains as long as they care that I'm engaged in that conversation. Like, if you really care, I think I could be made to care about a lot of things, but I can't be made to care about something that they don't care about, but someone else told them they should care about.
So, David, that was beautifully said, and I completely agree with you and resonate with it wholeheartedly. But I still think there's something about you. I think you still have to meet people where they're at. Like, because in Vervaeke terms and whatever, if they're bullshitting
This is the guy that calls out the midwit.
I know, and I contradicted it later. I'm a living paradox, okay? So because like, if they are presenting a false front and platitudes that not even they believe in, and they're not even self-aware of it, what are you going to do?
Well, this is
Like,
something that
options
I'm like been really struck with lately, and it's come up in two ways. In the recognition that words don't actually matter as much as we think we do at getting to know the person. And one side of it is, I'm in the Netherlands. I'm learning the Dutch language. I'm still pretty bad at it, but it's getting better. But there's so many times I'm sitting in social conversations where I can understand most of what's being said, but I can't contribute anything because I don't know how to say it. And so you just have to sit there in silence and take that in. And I don't know, there's something humbling about feeling so stupid and feeling like the midwit in the room that can't say a word, right? But there's something to the recognition of like, well, there's still power in the connection of trying and the way that we connect as humans, even if we can't connect in words. And the second half actually came from sort of the spiritual side. I don't remember where I heard it, but I read something about this monk who would refuse to talk to people after they did the liturgy, because they said that, the liturgy is this participation in communion. And he doesn't want to sully that communion that just happened with people by words. And there was something so shockingly beautiful in that, in this recognition of, and you can take it inside the church context or outside of it, but how many times are we out doing things together, trying to fill things with words where we're already learning so much about the being and how much we care about each other by being in the same room with each other. And there's something kind of beautiful of recognizing, whether big or small, sometimes the talking we do is trying to get at the person, but it might be able to get at that in silence. It's hard to do that online spaces because, it's so disembodied, but, it's interesting.
I want to add to what you're saying because my wife helped me to notice something, which was, so this guy, he is a Christian, but Dave, are you free to do lunch this week. We go for lunch, nothing for an hour. And like it's for his lunch hour, right? So it's nothing for 45 minutes. And then I'm driving him back to his work. And that's when he's going to have the conversation with me. That was the entire reason he wanted to go for lunch. It's after we've eaten, after we did all the time together. Now he wants to know, because he grew up hyper charismatic, what my opinion on speaking in tongues is. It's not the first thing. It's the reason we're eating, but it's not the first thing he's going to say to me. He's only going to say it. And I don't know how. My wife just knew about this because she used to work at a youth drop-in. Is that was so common with youths? Is that they would you would hang out with your friends all night, and then at the end of the party, you are now having the conversation that you wanted to have all night. Finally, I'm going to be able to say this little thing. But first we had to do all these stupid hangout rituals, all the small talk, all the everything. Now I'm able to talk to you one-on-one to tell you what I really wanted to talk about all along.
That's why hearing is so costly. It is one of the hardest forms of doing. Go ahead, Rod.
And that is it's not something I talk a lot about, but that is the premise behind Notes for Notes, is that when you're creating music together, you're forming bonds. And, every one of those youths, they come from really, really difficult backgrounds. Out there is a pretty scary place, but in here, it's a sanctuary. Here you can create music together, and that creates bonds. And when you're ready to talk, well, then you'll talk, but you don't have to come in ready to talk.
What's the pattern that you identified, Paul, in these? That's the pattern that you identified, Paul, in these long form conversations, particularly the Randos ones, that you don't start hearing the deeper, more real stuff until hour 2, right? The hour 1 is just kind of the small talk is so in our systems too. You're filtering through it to get to that meat.
Well, I feel like sometimes
Go ahead.
I was saying sometimes small talk is just a trust exercise.
Yeah. It's
Building that back
evolutionary.
and forth to the place where it's okay, can I trauma dump on you?
Well, and even if you think about, now I'm about to do the wrap up here for this part, but even if you look at this conversation, it took us, and I mean, these experiments, I run experiments on YouTube. I do all the time. And today's was an experiment in a lot of different ways. And you all are really OG TLCers. David is the newest, but there are relationships between you guys. You guys have each other pretty well mapped. And I think in some ways, it took us about an hour and 15 minutes before I really felt now we're starting to get into the groove. Now that spirit is really taking form, and now it's really giving me what I want out of this. And it just takes time. And those who watch the video, they're going to have to struggle through an hour and a half. And that's part of why this is so different from the rest of YouTube, which is, the YouTube methodology is grab them in the first 5 seconds. And if you don't do that, you're going to lose them, and then hold them the whole time. And then you can be Mr. Beast. So
now's the time where we break from the conversation and we sit down at one of the tables in Paul's sister's barn and eat the food that she prepared for us, and group up in smaller groups and start different conversations and say, what did you guys talk about? What did you guys